friends, and welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark,
And I'm Midge Munster.
and I want to welcome you back to a little segment that I like to call Penny's Critter Corner, where
Ooh.
I tell you about an animal that has been deemed scary or spooky in our world. And today, it's one of, I would say, the most aesthetic spooky creatures. We're going to
Oh.
talk about moths.
Oh, yay. That's fun.
Yes. So who among us does not appreciate a good moth? I am, of course, a person who has a moth tattoo,
Sure, sure.
and
In true bisexual fashion.
in true bisexual fashion, preserved moths and butterflies in my home. I do happen to know that you have a few of those yourself, Miss Midge.
Yeah, I'm definitely a bug girly as in general, as it were.
Yes. So I think as with many of us, my first awareness of moths was definitely just, the kind that you see bumping up on light bulbs in the summer.
Uh-huh.
But eventually I started getting introduced to some of the more stylish members of the family. And of course, as any other Animal Crossing girly, I caught a lot of interesting moths with my little net on my
Little
Animal
net.
Crossing island. Uh, so I thought it would be fun to talk about them today.
I'm excited. I was not ready for moth talk, but I'm glad that it's time.
Hell yeah, it's always time for moth talk. So we got to start with the basics. What are moths? This may seem like a dumb question, but it turns out that being a moth is kind of just like a vibe. Um, so,
I get it,
mo-
mobs, I do.
right? I know. So moths and butterflies are the two types of living thing that are part of the order Lepidoptera. And a moth is defined as an insect that's a member of that order, but is not a butterfly. So
Oh,
it's like literally butterflies and friends.
so if you're not, it's like a rectangle can be a square, but a square can't be a rectangle.
Right? Yeah. I'm like,
You're
butterflies are
not a
obviously
butterfly.
butterflies are the Beyonce in this
Yeah,
situation, and then you just
exactly.
got everybody else.
Yeah.
Um, right. So, with that kind of definition, you might not be surprised to hear that there are a lot of different kinds of moths. So, I will tell you, Midge, there are 17,500 species of butterfly.
Oh,
Would you like to guess how many species of moths there are?
I mean, I'm gonna guess there's more than that because anything that's
Hmm.
not that is a moth.
Yes,
I'm gonna say we're looking around like 50,000.
it's higher, Midge.
Tell me, how many moths are there?
160,000
Ooh,
varieties of moth.
that's a lot of moths.
What? That is so many types of moths. Moths came first. They existed before butterflies. There are moth fossils that are estimated to be 190 million years old,
Wow.
which crazy. Also, didn't ever really think about moths as a thing that there could be fossils of. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I guess
but
it
there
makes
you go.
sense.
Yeah, I mean, you
They've been
must.
around.
Yep. So the word moth comes from the Old English um, motha. So it's like the weird, like funky D's in Old
Oh,
English
yep.
that are with the th, which they think is maybe related to the word matha, meaning maggot, which is also the same root as da 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 midge.
Hey!
Hey,
I'm just a maggot.
you're just a
It's
maggot.
because I'm not a butterfly. I'm just
Yeah,
something else.
just a weird moth girl.
Yep.
So moths and butterflies do have like a lot in common. So Lepidoptera, the name of their order, actually means scale wing. These are
Ooh.
the only creatures we know of that have scales on their wings. So if you've ever like handled a moth or a butterfly and ended up with like powder on your hands, those
Mhm.
are teeny tiny scales from their wings coming off.
They're like little dragons.
They are like little dragons. And I thought that that was just going to be like a one off fact, except for then I read an article about why they have scaled wings. And it turns out it involves one of our other favorite spooky bugs, Spiders.
Yay!
Hey. So they think that the scales might help moths and butterflies escape from spider webs because if
Oh.
they like back off quickly enough, it'll like
They'll
just
just, like,
stick to
flake
a
away.
scale and they'll flake off and just be like, "Not today, motherfucker," and
That's cool.
fly on off. There's also apparently some theories about like it helping them fly, like air moving with the scales, but
Mhm.
I thought the spider part was most interesting.
Yeah, that's evolution, man. Cool.
Right? It's crazy. So in general, moths and butterflies have lots of things in common. In addition to their scaled wings, they are both the only creatures we know of that their proboscis, their little feeding tube,
Mhm.
coils back up. Um, and they both start off as caterpillars before transforming into their winged adult selves, which, like, okay, I'm just going to come out here and say that the fact that caterpillars turn into moths and butterflies is spooky as hell. Like that's fucked up, man. Like you're just like this little worm thing eating leaves and then one day you're like I'm just going to make myself a little blanket and then I'll just dissolve and become something that has wings? Like how is that even an option?
I know that's, like, in their genetic code, so they, on some level, like, know what's
Yeah,
happening, right? But, like, I can't imagine you just wake up one day as a different creature, and you're like, "What the
right?
hell?"
And like a creature with like an entirely different like
Anatomy.
mode of transportation
Yeah.
and anatomy, you're just
Mhm.
like, oh, I took a nap and then I woke up and I was a bird. Like
That's
what?
how I feel after a really long depressive episode sometimes.
It's like, wait, what?
Just wake up a completely different person, like, "Hello?"
Yes. There you go. I feel that. So there is apparently not like a super official way to group different types of moths. So
It
there
would seem not based on the
no.
160,000 categories.
Yeah, I read a bunch of different stuff about this that was very confusing, and I was just like, "This is it's late. I don't understand this." But it basically like there are subcategories that people use, but it sounds like none of them like reach the like biological scientific requirement to be like this is a legitimate like categorization
Mhm.
of animals. So who knows? It's not that important. Let's talk about how moths are different from butterflies. So moths tend to be stout and fuzzy instead of like long and slender like a butterfly. And they also usually have feathered antennae, where
Yeah.
butterfly have their little thin antennae with like a club or a ball on the end. Most moths are nocturnal, while most butterflies are out during the day. But there are counterexamples for like all of these. Like the page about moths is just like most moths are nocturnal, but here are the ones that are out during the day,
Except
and
for when they're
also
not.
here are ones that don't have feathered antennae. And I'm like, I see why you're confusing to us moths. You refuse to be categorized, and like I respect that.
A really niche stand-up special, just like, "What's the deal with moths?"
What's that's this podcast episode is basically what's the deal with moths. um, but moths are usually drab or dark colors, while butterflies are colorful. But as we all know, there are colorful moths, mostly the ones that do come out during the day. But there are some lovely nocturnal, colorful moths that we'll talk about. One thing that was just kind of random and cute, I thought, was butterflies tend to rest, like if they're sitting, like with their wings straight up, and moths usually rest with like their wings spread,
They're
which
showing off.
they're showing off. They're like, check these out. These out, guys. So if you think of a moth and you're not like us, a bisexual goth who loves moths, probably thinking about moths like zipping around the light bulb, like I mentioned before. Um, as as with most things, we're not really sure why they do this. The most popular hypothesis is that moths use the moon as like a point of navigation, and I guess that it like helps them travel in straight lines because they're always like kind of like equidistant from the moon if they just like fly towards it.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, when they see a bright light that's super close, they're all like, "Shit, is that the moon? Like, I better fly over here. Oh no, it's here. What's happening?" Um, And the sad thing is, there are theories that increase in light pollution in the world has disrupted moth mating and pollinating because they're just flying into things and they're not doing their normal moth stuff because they're like
Yeah,
traveling towards all these light bulbs.
makes sense.
Makes
Oh,
sense, yes, and so, of course, from this is where we have the phrase "drawn like a moth to a flame," so
yes.
moths are often used in literature to symbolize, like, obsession or attachment, as well as, much like butterflies, they're used as a symbol of transformation, new beginnings, they often represent those kinds of things to us. Moths are often known as pests. There are lots of moths that eat crops, or you might have been told to worry about moths eating your sweaters
Mhm.
growing up. But of course, this is not the majority of moths. As I just kind of mentioned, moths are actually pollinators, just like bees and butterflies. They are often underappreciated as pollinators because they're out doing their work at night when
Mhm.
we aren't there to observe them. But they are
But they're doing
flying
it.
around, landing on flowers, making sure they keep growing. So we appreciate you, moths. Thank you for that.
Thanks for your service, moths.
Thanks for your service. You also may not know that silk comes from moths. Um, Silkworms are not worms. They are actually the
Mhm.
larva of the Bombyx mori moth, and also a few other assorted types of moths, but that's like the primary one.
I weirdly did know that. I don't remember why I knew that, but
There you go. When I was younger, I always kind of imagined that silkworms like excrete silk, like a
right.
spider. This is not the case.
No, it is
So
not.
rip to all these moths. Sorry, guys. Um, the biggest moth is the Atlas moth, which can get up to a 9.5-inch wingspan.
Yeah, they're sick.
That's such a big moth. I definitely remember catching that one in Animal Crossing.
Yeah.
I definitely remember the Atlas moth.
Covers your whole face when you hold it up.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah, and finding it like, seeing actual, like, live pictures of one, like, sitting in someone's hand, and it's, like,
Yeah.
as bigger than your hand, that's crazy. I would not like to come across one of those unexpectedly, I will say. I'm like so I think we've talked about this before, but I'm like, I admire like the moss and the bugs, but also I'm not a bug girl. Like bugs do
Yeah.
gross me out. So I'm just like and the I didn't mind looking at like the pictures of the moths for this, but then I would like scroll down and there'd be like, here's the caterpillar, and I'd be like, ugh, ugh. I don't want to look at that one.
I think I'm definitely still a person who doesn't want to be surprised by an insect.
Hmm.
Like if a giant moth flew directly at my face, it would give me a
Ooh,
start for sure.
yes.
But I am like a handling, like I'm always picking up bugs and spiders and stuff.
Oh no, couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. I was legitimately worried. So, like, I thought about getting my moth tattoo for a long time, and
Mhm.
then I was like, "But what if it scares me?" And then I have it on my arm, and I look at it, and I'm like, "Oh god, there's a bug there."
I have that sometimes with my I have a phone case that has like really realistic spider
Mhm.
silhouettes on it. And I had that thought where I was like, what if every time I look at my phone I'm like, oh, spider.
Yes, I do have a friend of mine got a tattoo of some kind of beetle, and it does kind of scare me. So I was like, I don't know about this, but of course, for anyone who has seen my moth tattoo, it is very fantastical, and
Oh
so
yeah.
it does
I've
not.
I've never seen a moth look quite like that in real life. I will
Not
say.
quite like
Not
that.
quite.
But hey, speaking of notable moths, we have your friend and mine, the Death's Head Hawk Moth,
Hey.
known for its markings that resemble a human skull on the back of its body. So, this moth is probably most famous for its appearance in Silence of the Lambs, which we have an episode about. So, feel free to go check that out. But it has been featured in a variety of film and literature, including a Poe story,
Yeah.
The Sphinx. It's in La Chien Andalou, the like absurdist Salvador Dali film. Which have you ever watched that?
I did in college one time, but I don't
Yeah.
remember
I was
much of
gonna
it.
say I also watched it in college, and I do not remember the moth. I do remember an eyeball being cut open. That is the primary thing I remember from that
Yeah.
film. Wild stuff.
I just know I was a youth in college, and there were likely substances involved in the viewing of that.
Oh, see, we watch it in class, so
Oh, yeah, me too.
no. What now I'm like, what class would that have been for? I don't know.
Yeah, you don't
Well,
have, like, an art degree, right?
no, I mean, it's creative writing, so it's something I'm sure
Oh,
we were
yeah.
doing something about absurdist
Something
literature,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so and they were like, "Let's watch the Salvador Dali film." Whatever, not relevant. That was just a side topic.
College be wild. Anyway.
College do be wild. Things that I did not know is there are actually 3 different species, of death's head
Of
moth.
course there are, why wouldn't there
Right?
be?
I know. The one that you most likely are thinking of is the African death's head hawk moth, which is found obviously in Africa, but also in the UK. And then there are also 2 other Asian varieties that look very similar and also have that kind of skull marking on them.
Sometimes I get, like, wigged out thinking about the fact the fact that, like, other countries just have like, that moth in my head kind of seems, like, fake. Like, it's really
Yeah.
cool, but, like, because we
Hmm.
don't have them, I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
"That's not a real thing, though." And I'm like, "Man, imagine if you were just, like, walking around in the UK and that's just the thing that they have." That's crazy.
It is crazy. It is one of like, as I was reading these and they're like, "Oh, like, this is the most fabulous, like, American moth," and I was like, "Oh, shit, I guess we do have our own moths that nobody else." This is why there's 160,000 of them. Sometimes they're just living in their own countries, doing their own thing.
Well, and death's head moths famously have British accents, so I guess that makes
Yes,
sense.
of course,
Yeah.
every death's head moth has a British accent, as we all know. Probably, I would say the other most popular moth is the Luna moth. Um,
Yes.
so I was really enjoying reading about this moth because so many of the articles about it were just like so admiring
Yeah.
of it. They were just like, "Oh, definitely the most stunning of the American moths," and apparently, it's the only moth that has ever been on a U.S. postage stamp.
Oh, that's cool.
Like there have been several butterflies, but the Luna moth is the only moth, and the Luna moth is also on the cover of some like moth guide, but because this website was just like, oh, often like selected as a representative of its species, which I liked that.
Yeah.
Also, the main thing that I remember about Luna moths was that do you remember Lunesta
Oh,
commercials?
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, yes. So for anyone who doesn't know, this was what probably in like the 2000s, 2010s. There was a sleeping medicine called Lunesta, and it was like a beautiful Luna moth was shown like flying through and like
It would, like, touch people, and they would, like
gently touching you and putting you to sleep.
Yeah.
Do you want to know something wild about Luna moths?
Of course.
They don't have mouths or a
Oh.
digestive system because they never eat. They only live for a week, and they just burn off all of the food they ate as a caterpillar, and then they die.
Wow.
And that's a thing that a lot of moths do, which I think is pretty creepy.
That's that seems like an evolutionary fault somewhere.
They're just living their best caterpillar life, and then they're like, okay, real quick, gonna turn into a moth,
Gonna
lay
evolve
some
to have no
eggs, and
mouth.
then die.
This is like have you all seen this video? What are their names? Frankie and something, the other
Oh yeah,
podcast?
yeah,
And they're talking about how, like, whales have to breathe every, like, 20 minutes.
yeah.
They have to like, that just seems that's an underwater mammal. Like, what?
Right, just
Like,
poor
what do you
design.
mean? Yeah, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't have a mouth, moth?
Nope, no moth,
Your
no
your
mouth,
your
mouth,
your
mouth.
name yeah, I was gonna say your name is one letter off of mouth, and you don't have one?
Oh man, yeah, that's crazy. But I mean, I guess like I have definitely had times where I'm like, I wish I didn't need to eat or sleep and I could just like be a robot and live. But
And die a week later.
maybe what I actually wanted was to be a Luna moth and just be beautiful and then die.
I mean, you haven't died yet, but you're succeeding at the beauty part, so
Hey.
congratulations.
Thank you. I think those are probably like the most popular moths. We do also, I want to give a shout out to the rosy maple moth, who is a beautiful pastel little pink and yellow. Got a shout out on Our Flag Means Death, which I think brought it back into our public appreciation of moths.
Is that the one that Hasoteratoma did that moth look based on that was pink and
I think
yellow?
yes, yeah, that would be the rosy
What is
maple
it?
moth.
Rosy maple? Okay, I don't
Yeah,
think I've ever actually seen one. I'm about to give it a goog.
it's so cute.
Oh my god, she's
It is so
precious.
yes, like, that is, like, if someone was
That
like,
looks AI
draw
generated.
me like, a kawaii moth," that is what someone would draw, but it's real.
Literally, if I saw that online, I'd be like, "Oh, that's AI. That's not
Yeah.
real." That
No, for
is
sure.
she's so why is she so cute?
She is so cute.
Oh no, there's a mini like squishmallow one of her. Okay. Well,
Yes, yes, I
I,
have.
I'm having a problem. Continue.
Mm. Midge is having new moth realizations, throughout this episode. Oh gosh. Yes, but as I kind of mentioned before, like, briefly, and I think very much ties in, like, in Silence of the Lambs, we definitely see the moth as a symbol of transformation, and, that is the case in literature and cultures. There's apparently, there are some, like, I was trying to find like superstitions and things about moths. There's not a whole lot of specific ones. Like there is some connection between moths and death, just because they're out there being spooky in the nighttime.
In the
I feel
night,
like
right?
any nocturnal creature people are like this probably has to do
That's
with death.
death. Right. Well, and I was
It-
even gonna say too, you brought up our Silence of the Lambs episode, but also our Crimson Peak episode. I mean, Crimson Peak
yes,
uses
yes.
a lot of this imagery of like moths as especially when you said like the idea of obsession. Like I feel like the moth
Hmm.
really in that is Lady Lucille and her
Mhm.
hunger, her
Her
obsession.
hunger, yes. Yes, black moths. And oh gosh, I just had it in my brain and it went away. Oh yeah, when so you mentioned evolution earlier,
Hmm.
and there is a moth that is kind of famously used as a demonstration of evolution. It's called like the peppered moth,
Hmm.
and they observed them in the UK that after the Industrial Revolution, these moths started to get darker. They think because
Oh,
they're trying to blend in with like soot covered trees.
yes, I remember reading about that.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? And now
It's very
they've
cool.
they've kind of
I
like
mean, it's
started
also very
and
sad because pollution,
yes,
but
but they've started to get lighter again as like,
mm,
once we were like, oh, maybe it's not great to just like pump soot everywhere.
yeah, maybe crazy thought, maybe we shouldn't just pump coal into the air
Right. Wild thought. What if we
that
didn't do
we breathe and need to survive.
that? Do you have a favorite moth, Midge? Is it one of the ones we've talked about, or do you
Well,
have another favorite?
apparently now it's the rosy maple moth that I didn't
Yes.
know existed. I mean, I had awareness, but I had not
I
seen
hadn't
it,
seen it, yeah.
and
Yeah, once you see it, you're
much
like, "Oh, that's a good moth."
it's so much cuter than I ever knew it could be. Um, yeah, I mean, I think like my introduction to moths was probably the Luna moth. I feel like that's
Mhm.
probably pretty common. But I love that she's kind of like absinthe green. Like she's
Yes.
very, very hoey and glowy, and I love her for it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you and I are both. I love like the dark counterpart to anything
Yeah.
beautiful, and as we know, the moth is definitely not a butterfly. It's if we know
Yes.
it's the only thing we
If
know.
there's one thing we know about moths,
It's that
they're
it's
not
not a
butterflies,
butterfly.
and that's it.
So, yeah, I love them. 'em. They're little spooky guys.
They are. I'm fond of them too. they're spooky. They're like, I gotta get up on this. I gotta get my good lighting. I mean, who doesn't relate to that?
They really understand me.
Yeah, I feel like moths are like butterflies, like cool weird sister,
Yeah.
and
It's the goth
I
cousin at the family function.
exactly, and I
Yeah.
was like, and I too, as a weird goth sister slash cousin, I can relate to the moth
Who
experience.
who was also green at one point.
Yes, also green, can be in drab colors, but will occasionally show up looking very bright. All right. That is Penny's Critter Corner. I just was thinking about moths and I was like, I should tell Midge about moths today.
And I'm so glad you did.
Well, thank you, friends, for joining us. If you are a fan of moths in general or any particular moth, we would love to hear about it. Um, and if you are enjoying the show, we would even more love to hear about that. You can, you could even leave a review talking about your favorite moth. So you can leave those on Apple iTunes. You can leave Spotify comments, or if the place that you listen doesn't let you leave reviews, you can always send one to us on Instagram, which I think Midge has today.
I do. This is from Lil Jess the Strange, and Jess
Ooh.
sent us an Instagram DM review that says, hey, I wasn't able to leave a review where I listened to your pod.
Well, there you go.
There you go. But I just wanted to say I love you both so much. I found you when I found Midge's video on her trip to Salem in September, and on my flight and trip, I just binged your podcast, and
Oh.
now it makes my Mondays less crappy. Also, I love that. Where did I lose my spot? Also, I love that you are Midwest girlies who also love Vixen and La Femme en Noir. Hey. That Crimson Peak set is to die for. That is true. Penny and I are both, we had much trepidation figuring out what pieces we were going to buy from that Crimson
Yes.
Peak. I'm a spooky Midwest gal in St. Louis. Oh my gosh. And I'm just in love with this podcast. Every week I get to hear about things I love and learn about things I didn't know. Please never stop. We don't plan to.
We don't.
We're going to
Also,
keep going.
did we both get the moth dress from the Crimson Peak?
We did, but I think we got different cuts. I got the baby
Yes,
doll,
I
and you
got
got
the
the other one, right?
midi.
Yeah. So there you
Hey,
go. Some moth
moth
action for you.
girlies.
Well, Jess, I'm excited to hear that you're in St. Louis, and if I'm out there a lot, so you know, maybe we'll see each other around sometime. Give me a shout if you see me walking around with Andrew and Devin.
For sure. All right. If you want to be like Jess and follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Ghouls Night in Pod, where I will be posting some photos of attractive moths. And if you would like to follow me, you can find me across the web at Penny Snark.
And you can find me all over the web at Midge Munster.
And until next time,
Goodbye.
goodbye.